Your business is one of a kind, so your website should be too. With Wix, it's easy, almost too easy, to create a website that's perfectly yours. Just tell AI what kind of site you want to build or choose from thousands of templates. Change whatever you want, whenever you want, and get everything you need to start running your business your way. No matter what you sell or what you aspire to be, you can do it all, yourself, on Wix.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Welcome to the Writing Black Joy podcast, where we celebrate the joyful narratives of the Black creatives writing their names on the pages of history and on our hearts. I am your host, Sophia Robinson. Here, you'll find conversations with amazing Black creatives, learn more about their projects and the joy that they're bringing into the world, find inspiration for your own creative ventures, and dive deep into the topics that shape our narratives. The guests on this podcast are all sorts of creatives, from writers of fiction and nonfiction to playwrights and actors, visual artists, podcasters, and so much more who are bringing joy to their narratives. So, if you are a writer, a creative, or a lover of the arts, or you simply want to hear some good conversations, keep on listening and welcome to the show. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. Thank you so much for joining me here and for tuning in this week and for being my co-creators on this journey. If you haven't already done so, or if this is your first time listening, please hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode and share with a friend, especially those friends of yours whose love language is receiving podcast recommendations like mine is. This week's guest is the amazing Karla Marie Sweet, and I loved our conversation so much. Before we dive in, a little bit about Karla. Karla Marie Sweet is a British-American actor, screenwriter, novelist, and dramaturg born and based in Manchester, UK. Recent acting credits include acclaimed road movie Black Dog and season 2 of Hulu's No Man's Land. As a writer, she has multiple television credits to her name, and her comedy drama script, Da Silva and Sharp, landed her on the 2023 Brit list. Her theatre credits include Cheetham Hill for the Royal Exchange and This Little Relic, BBC Radio 3 and the Belgrade Theatre. Her speculative fiction novel Another Life was released as an Audible original in September 2024 and was performed by Erin Doherty and Kingsley Benadier. And False Idols is Karla's print debut. It has been described as a fascinating look at the intoxicating world of cults and their charismatic leaders, and it tells the story of an LA wellness community hiding a dark secret. Karla and I discuss her childhood experiences of creative performance, the impact of becoming physically disabled as a teenager, how early rejection made her resilient in her creative pursuits, the value she sees in putting our work out into the world and setting aside any perfectionism that we have as creatives, what happened to her first novel, and how the rejection of that first novel fed into her most recent book, False Idols, the topics that she touched on in False Idols, including the both and of the wellness industry, the cognitive dissonance that can come from being in a space that gives you so much and also takes so much and so much more. How she approaches writing her characters and writing complex, layered characters that are true to life. How she thinks that Thanos was right. Well, not really, but really. And how she's approaching her next book. And I cannot wait to have her on to discuss that, as well as being an aunt and so much more. Now, you may have noticed this season and last that towards the end of every episode, I have a lightning round. And it's been such a hit that I am bringing that lightning round to you, my listeners. Go over to www.writingblackjoy.com and leave me a voice note, and you may be featured on an episode later in the season. I can't wait to hear what's bringing you joy right now. What's bringing me joy right now? Taking us over to Karla's conversation. So let's head over there, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy, and today I have with me Karla Marie Sweet. I wrapped up reading your book literally a couple of days ago. It was really good. I wanted to do it just before we spoke, and we're talking about false idols. But first of all, Karla, thanks so much for joining me. I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Absolutely. I'm going to dive straight into the questions. Now, obviously, from reading your bio, I know you are a creative with range. Acting, writing, drama, to everything. Now it's a novel. So just tell us a little bit about that journey. Is it fluid? Do you go from one thing to the next? Was it more of like an evolution? Tell us a bit about that.
I definitely wasn't fluid in many ways, although I'm trying to put less negativity into the vortex that is my career / the industry, because I think it's very easy to wake up every day and be like, oh, this is hard. This is really hard. Very easy to kind of, I don't know. I said to somebody not so long ago that my career has been a bit like scaling a cliff face, but instead of being given a pickaxe, I have a toothpick. So things move slowly, but I am trying to see the gaps and see the challenges as challenges, and them being character building and them serving to further define what I want and what I'm meant to do. It all started with acting, and acting is my number one. Acting is still my number one. And writing started to become this thing that I would do when I was waiting for opportunities to perform. And I started acting when I was like 8, doing kind of amateur dramatics in my local area in North Manchester. And then we emigrated to the States when I was 12. And I got into a school in Georgia that was a state school, but they used I don't know how familiar you are with magnet schools. Where are you based?
I'm not. I'm actually from Barbados, currently based in the UK, and I've lived in a lot of places, not America. So you're going to have to fill me in on that one.
Okay. So a magnet school is where they take state funding, typically given to the school for sport, and they use that money for something else. So in the case of my school, it was for the arts. So you had to audition in 5 different areas: creative writing, art, drama, dance. Oh, there was something else. Music. Yeah. You had to audition to get in. And then if you got in, you would kind of have part of your day that would be academic subjects, and then the rest of your day would be arts subjects. And if you got lower than a C in any subject, you got kicked out and you couldn't come back. So it was highly competitive and very challenging. But I was dancing and acting every day. I'd go to school with a leotard under my clothes, and it was great for a really long time. And then when I was 17, my knees started to fail me. And it turns out I have this condition called degenerative tendinosis in both my knees. And that meant that I had to take a significant amount of time out from certainly dance and in one way drama, because, things just weren't accessible back then. I mean, they're not particularly great for accessibility now. But while I was kind of trying to get over the hump of needing sort of mobility aids at that time, I kind of thought, wow, what am I going to do now? And I kind of looked at the wider sort of creative landscape when it came to acting. And I thought, well, there's not many people in the acting world that look like me anyway. There's certainly not people who look like me and have a disability. So how is this going to work? And, on top of all of that, you've got your general kind of dealing with the naysayers anyway of, oh, it's the hardest job in the world and very few people make it and all of that, and are you really even that talented? And my school was one that really kind of played favorites. And if you were not a favorite, then you just didn't really get looking. No. But actually, in retrospect, all of the things that happened to me at that time were actually quite positive in the long run, because I may have gone off and had a dance career or whatever at that time. And that's a very short career and a very tough career. And I may never have found writing at that time, which is what ended up happening to me, because I physically couldn't do much of anything else at that time. And I also think that what's quite interesting with what has happened to the majority of people that went to my school is that those that were the favorites then got out into the real world and experienced rejection for the very first time and couldn't handle it. And it was, and they quit. Whereas those of us who weren't the favorites went out into the world and experienced rejection and rejection and rejection and rejection. We're like, okay, well, this is just life. I had years of this when I was at school. So I kind of was on that, a very different path than I ever intended for many, many years. That was a path that wasn't as creative as I would have liked it to have been, let's say that. But I was always kind of writing in the background, never thinking, oh, I could be a writer, and certainly not thinking I could act anymore. And it took me a really, really long time to start to realize that maybe I could write the roles that I wasn't seeing on screen for people like me and people not like me, people who I also was seeing who were getting represented, And so I kind of got into screenwriting and playwriting through that avenue. But in the meantime, I'd been to university. I'd done media and sociology at university. While I was at university, I got into radio because music was always a big passion of mine. And I kind of followed that avenue for a really long time and eventually ended up at the BBC and worked in radio for 5 years there and still writing in the background. But it wasn't until 2014 when a play that I had sent, I won a competition and it got staged over a couple of nights in Liverpool. And, it wasn't a 6-week run in the West End or anything like that. It really was the back end of Liverpool. But it was that kind of beginner's luck that made me go, oh, maybe there's something here. Maybe I can actually do this. This is the very first thing I've sent out and it's getting made. Maybe everything I send out will get made now. And that isn't what happened. That is not what happened. Yeah, I mean, if I thought that writing for stage and screen would be any easier than acting, I was really misguided. But yeah, I have now kind of come back around to acting sort of in the last 7-ish years. Wow. And I'm really glad that I returned to it, because I think that during all of that time, when I was just writing and I was working in radio and I was doing all these little creative things that were very close to the thing I wanted to do, but were not the thing I wanted to do, I was kind of denying a part of myself and I really wasn't living my life authentically. And I think I made myself very miserable as a result of that. And so even though, kind of being a late bloomer in terms of acting by returning to it at such a, a later stage of life, it's really made it even harder for myself than it perhaps would have been. But I feel so much more fulfilled in it. And I think as a result of this journey that I've been on, I've got a real kind of bee in my bonnet about living life authentically. And I think that's something that really kind of comes through in this novel as well.
Absolutely. Yes. Something you said earlier, though, which I do want to touch on, you talked about getting used to that rejection, and in terms of, those who may have been the favorites at school, not ever having experienced that. And, I think about that a lot, because I think there is, or there can be rejection, I suppose, if you're in those creative spaces, whether you're sending a book to an agent or, putting a play out there or going to an audition or whatever. And I think that's one of the things that people find hard about it. So I love that you could see how the thing that felt stressful at the time of like, okay, maybe you're not the favorite, maybe you're not getting those opportunities, actually kind of set you up for the creative spaces where rejection is just, I always remember hearing people talk about it and saying things like, if you know you're going to get rejected like 20 times, so maybe you go out 50 times instead of going out once and what happens, And
I felt that if only it was only 20 times.
I pulled the number out of the air, but I mean, it's just getting used to it or being able to kind of get past it and continue doing what is something that you want to do.
And continuing to believe that you actually can do it and you have something to offer, which is the hardest thing. I've been thinking recently about how each of your creative projects is such a labor of love. It's almost like bringing a child into the world, and you have to love that child unconditionally in order to survive kind of the aftermath of what it is to bring that child into the world, And so, if a stranger on the internet said something mean about your child, you'd just be like, what a loser, what a jerk. They obviously don't see, the what's so amazing about my child. If a stranger on the internet says something nice about your child, it's like, oh, that's nice. Yeah, means a lot. But neither of these things impact the love that you have for your child, because that love is unconditional. And I think we need to see our work like that as well. And so, I think during the process of creating something, feedback can often be very helpful. And, we can even look back ourselves at things that we've created and kind of go, okay, it's not perfect. And I have learned from the process of creating that how to do better in the next project. But I think there are a lot of people who are so afraid of criticism from the outside world. They become this really extreme level of perfectionist where they just release anything, or they, maybe put one project out into the world that is wildly successful. And again, going back to what I was saying about my high school experience, because that project was so wildly successful, they're like, okay, well, I now need to match that project or do better than that project. And what if I can't? And then they kind of feed into this perfectionism, which when you really think about perfectionism, it's just another form of narcissism, right? And I think about that a lot. Like,
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, because I also think whatever idea has been brought into you, you are just a vessel for, right? You're just a vessel for this message, and I really believe that every single idea has just come from the source, the collective consciousness. And who am I to be like, because of my own ego, guys, I'm not going to put this message or these ideas that I've been gifted with out in the world, because my ego is too fragile to cope with the fact that there might be negative feedback. It's like, wow, this isn't all about you. Get over yourself. It's actually not.
No, I mean, it's so interesting that you should say that, because I've been blogging for quite a few years, and this morning I was writing a post about putting art into the world, right? And like how it does its job simply by being out in the world. It doesn't have to necessarily be like, this big, you don't have to have a big gallery or what, like it doesn't have to be that thing in order to have an impact as a piece of art that's out in the world. And so I think that's such a good point, because we attach to it, oh, well, it has to be this and it has to be that, and what if it's this and what if it's that. But to me, I am like, it's also important for it to just be out in the world, right? Like, I think there's such a thing as critical mass, and if enough things are out in the world, they will have a completely different impact than if there's one or two. And so if none of those other people put it out because it wasn't hitting those milestones, then what? Do you know what I mean? It wouldn't become a part of something. So I think I definitely can see that.
It's not necessarily even about milestones. We have such many ideas about what success is. And what if success is just being in the game? Like, what if success is, especially, if you've been in the game for a really, really long time and you haven't been like, you haven't won loads of awards or whatever. What if it is about the struggle? And I think about that a lot, because everybody has a different journey, right? And I do feel like the industry, all of the industries that I'm involved in, need to be way more accessible, particularly for people like us, you know? But I also think that if there has to be some kind of struggle, what can we find within that struggle that is useful to us and is useful to our storytelling and is useful to our, you know, the characters, you know, it lends itself to the characters that we create. Because I think one thing that is sort of universal is struggle, you know, and I think everybody kind of identifies with characters who struggle. And I think it's so much easier for us to create conflict on the page or on the stage or on the screen if we have had experience of struggle ourselves. So there's that. And I also think, I guess I think that we can never know the impact our work may have on another person.
Like what?
And, you know, it's possible it may only impact a handful of people, but those people, it might completely change their lives, or it might make them think about something differently or approach something differently. And can that be enough, you know?
And that's such a good point. I was actually thinking about that when you talked about that first play that you wrote being put on in Manchester. And in the last maybe month or two, I've been listening to these podcasts, and they were talking about the business of theater. An American podcast, they were talking about Broadway and the business of theater. And one of the things they were saying, you know, was like, people think of Broadway, when they think of theater in America, they're thinking Broadway is like that standard that you're reaching. But they were like, so much of theater happens in schools and, you know, in communities and in sort of cities across the country. Broadway is like a tiny percentage of that. And actually, it is those smaller productions that happen in schools and that are licensed, you know, students are performing them and that type of thing. Like they have a huge impact. They'll have an impact on type of students that went to the school that you went to. But also they even have a financial impact in terms of keeping the industry going. Yeah. So I think it was just a reminder to me that like, it's easy to think the only way you've made it is to, you know, be on Broadway or the West End if you're in the UK. But actually, I feel like so much more of the industry is not there and can be a measure of success if you let it, right? If you let it be a measure of success, then it can be. So I really like looking at things. I think won't aim for, that's not what I'm saying, not saying don't, but I'm just saying I like that they said that because it's just a reminder, you know, like I grew up in Barbados, right? And I was a grown person before I even set foot in the UK, in London or New York or whatever to see those things. But I grew up doing drama club. I grew up doing things, and I always say, like, I don't think I could do things like have this podcast if I did not do things like drama club when I was I an actor? No, I will never be. I'm unlikely to be a professional actor. Never say never, right? But it's unlikely. It's not one of my goals, right? But for me, that impacted me in so many ways. You know, I teach at a university now, and people are, how can you stand up in front of 300 people? And it's only because I did the drama club, I did the choirs and the whatever. Am I going to ever be professional at those things? Unlikely, but they have made me the person I am. I don't think that's going to be true for a lot of people. The amount of people that I work with at the university now whose first degrees were theater, and now the things that they do because of that background is mind-blowing to me. I feel like creativity it does so much more than we think. And so to me, I think it's really important to maintain those things, because that direct piece of outcome, that show on the West End or whatever, isn't, to me, it's like a thing, but there's like a million other things. I feel like we will lose those things if only the things that are on the West End are successful, you know? So, but that's just my... And
you used a really important word there, which is outcome. And there's such an obsession with outcome, isn't there?
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that is because we're caught between two things here. The first thing is that we're living under capitalism. And what that often means is that things have to be a commercial success in order for them to quote, quote, matter or
Yes.
have impact. And, really, in order to make it so that the arts aren't so outcome obsessed, is if we dismantle the capitalist structure. So should we do that?
So can we just do that? Can we just be the just do that? Listen, I have so many feelings right now. I would go down the rabbit hole deep if we do. So
We'll try not to too deep down that rabbit hole.
when you were ready, we will write. I mean,
But that's the real issue, isn't it? So we're dealing with that and the challenges of that, and also the fact that capitalism low-key hates artists. And the reason for that is because capitalism is all about the 1% or the rich people owning the means of production, right? And the rest of us having to labor with that means of production. But the great thing about artists is we are our own means of production, right? So we create the product ourselves. We are the product. And there's something so amazing about that, something that kind of means that we naturally color outside of the lines, and that can be quite scary for capitalism. So they have right, how can we put this in a box so that we can deal with it under capitalism? Right, we make it commercial. We make it commercially viable is how, and we tell those, creative projects that aren't commercially viable or, don't make as much money as the rest, that they don't matter. And that's a real way of making artists feel small so that they don't get out of their little box. And then the other thing that we, are kind of caught with as well, or caught up in, is again, going back to this thing that I was saying about ego, is this idea that I think so many of us are taught from like the youngest age, is that we have to become masters of our craft. We have to master. Now, what does that mean? Why are we master?
Well, we're using the word. And also, why does something have to be like, that's something I think about a lot, partially for the reasons I just told you. And it's like, I was never a commercial success at any of the music or any of the whatever that I did. And it has changed my life completely, right? And so to me, that was enough. I didn't have to do grade 8, whatever of the whatever, but still enjoy music, right? I still play, I still sing, I still do the things. Guess I may not be a sort of a professional, but I've done some cool stuff, right? And I think for me, I feel like that idea of mastery, what it does is it kind of, it makes people feel like, if I'm not going to be really good at it, is there any point in doing it? Of course, there's a point in doing it.
Of course, there's a point in doing it. And it is, as you was kind of implying earlier, is that it's more about the journey than the outcome. And this idea of master, maybe it's my ancestors twitching through me when I hear that word, but it implies control. Like, why are we trying to, or, as if our craft is this horse that we're trying to ride that we have to break. And actually, what if we thought more in terms of like, how can I serve this craft? Like, what can I bring to writing or acting or, whatever it is that you want to pursue, And I feel like,
add to it.
Along those lines keeps me sane.
Love that. I love what you said earlier about being a vessel. I've long felt like the tap, like, okay, an idea comes in and something happens to it in my brain and I put it out there and then it has a life of its own and good luck to it.
Right?
I can no longer control that. There's a podcast that I've been listening to recently about a TV show. And, this is one of the things they talk about. They talk about the fact that this thing has, once you put it out there, it becomes an entity within itself and it will have its own life. And where are we even trying to control that? What makes us think that we can? It's like, It's like when we try to control nature, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's coming back. Like it's not. It will never be far. It will never be far at me.
And I think it's, again, going back to that metaphor, isn't it, of having a child. And, you will raise that child as well as you can. But once it's out in the world, it's out in the world. And you cannot continue to try and control it. That child then belongs to the world. And, can you imagine if, like, you're 9.5 months pregnant, you're literally about to pop this baby out, and somebody comes over to you and says, just so you know, they're going to have a job that you don't really approve of that doesn't actually make that much money. Would you then be like, I got to keep this baby in. I can't let it out. No. Or it's going to have a boyfriend that has a really boring hobby, and this boyfriend is always going to talk about, or maybe the baby's going to have a really boring hobby when it grows up. You're not going to be like, oh my God, I need to keep, your baby's going to be a Manchester City fan. Oh,
that is so funny. I laugh. I know people in various stages of parenthood who have had to dismantle that belief.
Yeah.
You really do throw their children. So,
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So unconditional love, I think, is what it's about. And
for that
just leaning into the fact that creating, just like everything else, but creating, I think, especially whether you're creating life or creating work or, whatever it is that you are creating, is a spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about you, and yeah, I think I cling on to these things like little life rafts.
And it's so true. We have been talking for longer than I realize, and we have not even done to talk about fall. So I almost feel like we're going to need a whole part 2. I will reach out if we can at least talk a little bit about this book, which I loved. So just tell me a little bit about the inspiration for this story. I know obviously you lived in the States, and so I don't know if you lived in that part of the States on the West Coast. I don't know if that you did.
Well, I lived in Georgia, which is where the character is from and where all these flashbacks take place. And obviously I've spent time in LA, and it is as a lot of my work is kind of inspired by like the place. So yeah, but False Idols is not my first novel. There's actually another novel called Another Life that I started writing in 2019, and that novel was bought by Audible and came out as an audiobook in September 2024, read by Erin Doherty, who's amazing. You might know her from Adolescence. I feel like the world now knows her from Adolescence.
I know who she is, but I hadn't heard the book, actually.
Yeah. So she's been working for years and is an incredible talent. And I'm so glad people are becoming aware of her now. And Kingsley Benadir, who obviously played Bob Marley in the Bob Marley biopic. So they read that book. But that was a book that I thought was never going to come into the world. And I started writing False Idols on the day that I had a conversation with my agent about how it looked like my first novel was not going to happen. And so I had this huge sense of loss, this huge sense of grief. And that really fed into False Idols because the character is also dealing with that. The character is, dealing with a huge sense of regret as well, on top of all of these things, and incredible loneliness, which I was not experiencing at the time. But, I lived in London for 12 years and I was incredibly lonely for most of that time. And so I could really kind of tap into that desire for a sense of, community and belonging. And, I have that now here in Manchester and it's amazing. But yeah, I know that experience, and I know Sadie and I know her life, and so I think that was a lot of the inspiration behind it. And also just experiences that I had both dealing with sort of mainstream medicine, etc., the medical system in general, and then the wellness industry, which we hope would always offer an alternative to, I guess, to capitalism, to some extent, white supremacist hetero patriarchy.
Right. That norm, the sort of mainstream quote unquote norm, because I don't think there's anything normal about anything, but like just that idea that hetero, as I said, that sort of normativity, that mainstream.
And then discovering that rather than an alternative, it's its own it can be its own sort of capitalist system, at least here in the West, where we see a lot of incredible Eastern practices being commodified and watered down and then sold back to us at a very high price. So I wanted to kind of explore corruption. Corruption is kind of a big interest of mine, just kind of generally speaking, and it's something that I touched on something that I explored quite deeply in another life as well. Just the idea that anything can be bad if you put it in the wrong hands.
Yes. Yeah. And that's such a good point. And I think part of what drew me into, looking into the book, reading the book, and kind of, I worked in I still work in healthcare. Actually, I worked in healthcare for a long time, and I've always felt that there were a lot of things missing from healthcare. And one of the things I thought was missing from healthcare was wellness. I felt like healthcare is about illness. It's about an illness, about a disease. The name is almost a bit misleading, like you say healthcare, but it's not about health. It's about illness. Yeah. And so when I first discovered the wellness industry, to me, I was like, this is what's missing from healthcare. Like, this is the sort of the thing, to me, healthcare is like helping you to run away from the thing you're running away from. And wellness was supposed to be the thing that you could be running towards, So I really felt that when I discovered it, and then quickly got a little bit disgusted by it. It sounds awful, but I think that's what drew me into reading the book. But one of the things you talked just now about corruption and the idea that anything can be corrupt. And one of the things that struck me, not just from this book, but from the wellness industry itself and people that I've known in various organizations, etc., is just this idea that something can be as helpful as it is damaging. I don't think that's not the right way to say it, but like, there are going to be people out there who, you talk about some of these practices that have been watered down, but in their true forms, they are powerful, they are healing, they are helpful, and they can also, I guess, be corrupted, right? They can also then be damaging. And also that, I have this friend who, she actually wrote a book about coming out of an organization. And one of the things she talks about was that what made it hard for her to leave, and I saw this in Sadie, was that their life was actually better from being there, right?
Yeah.
They actually did benefit from the thing this thing said that they were going to benefit from, right? They felt more confident. They actually, their mindset started to change. They did. And so it was, so that even when you start to see the cracks and start to see, this is, it's hard because you are at that moment also experiencing the good side of the thing that you've gone into.
Yes. But isn't that just an amazing, again, I'm going back to capitalism, parallel for capitalism?
Absolutely.
Like, the reason why we haven't destroyed the capitalistic structure system that is ruining all of our lives and creating such, God, like, look at what's going on in the world right now. It's absolutely horrific. And we know that the root of all of that is capitalism, but because so many of us are benefiting from it, we don't do anything about it. And this is the issue that, you do find in a lot of these kind of cult-like organizations, is that it's not all bad,
No, exactly.
There are, and I think, it's true of the wellness industry as a whole. God, I've benefited so much from the wellness industry. There is so many tools and so many wonderful experiences that I've been able to get through it. But there is also a dark side, and two things can be true at once. And the challenge of some of these charismatic kind of cult leaders is that not all of what they say is wrong. You know, a lot of the time you've got like 80% of what they say is bang on, but the other 20% is absolutely wild.
Twisted and wild. And I think sometimes, I've seen people go into situations like this where they're drawn in by that 80%, right? They can feel that truth. They go in, they're experiencing the benefits that come from that truth. And then the little twisting starts, a little sort of, and it's almost impossible to see at first. The thing I found interesting about Sadie was I feel like she was almost having cognitive dissonance from day one, right? Like, I think we all experience that cognitive dissonance of like, you go in and something is off in this space.
Yeah.
But also, wow, it's amazing. My life has changed. And it's such a weird sort of feeling. And it's hard to know which to trust.
And it's maybe it's just meanness of it all. Maybe it's me being in this space, and maybe it's all the things that have happened to me in the past. Maybe they're making me too guarded. Maybe I'm not, maybe it's not my intuition telling me something's wrong. Maybe I'm just triggered. All these things that I think that what I was really trying to get across with Sadie is she's not an idiot. Like, she's not an idiot. Like, she knows from the beginning, there's things about this that are kind of icky. But nonetheless, there's also great things about it. And I think that's the case for so many things. And I think, with any kind of abusive relationship as well, like, people wonder why people end up getting so deep in with abusers. And it's not because, they came across this person on the street that was like screaming and shouting obscenities and like threatening to punch you and maybe even punching you and went, oh, yeah. Oh, he looks great. Oh, yeah, that's what I want. Like, that person knows how to play the game. They are actively seeking vulnerable people, and then they love bomb them. The love bombing is a really huge part of, bringing people into cults as well. And then it is a slow kind of siphoning of their spirit,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do want to talk a little bit about Lilith. I feel like I know people like her, it's so disturbing too. I read it, I was like, oh gosh.
Yeah. So many people have said that to me. They feel like they've known Lilith, or they've come across a Lilith,
Yeah, I've definitely come across at least one Lilith. So how was it to, I always wonder how it is to write those characters. I'm going to assume you're nothing like Lilith. I'm going to just I'm going to go on that limb and make an assumption there. Tell us a bit about what it was like to write that character and how, because even those type of people are layered too, right? They have those layers as well. So how was that? Yes.
Do I think writing all characters is like acting, and I think writing a novel especially is like it's like writing a really long character study of a character that you may never play. But I also think that if we as human beings are all the universe experiencing consciousness through us, then characters that we create are us kind of exploring parts of ourselves that we would never kind of necessarily bring up in everyday life, because we can recognize how damaging certain behaviors can be. And I think, it's always strange to me when someone's like, oh yeah, he couldn't have done that. He doesn't have it in him. And it's like, well, we have multitudes within us. And that kind of like that, the thing that separates good people from bad people, not that there is really good people and bad people, I'm being incredibly reductive when I say that. It's all about the perspective through which you see certain people. But really, it's about the choices that we make. We are all capable of so many things, and we just choose not to pursue that.
You make those choices. And I always say that. I'm always like, we do not know what we would, and I would go even further and say, I don't know what I would choose if I was actually in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah.
To say, oh, that person did that, I would never do that. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that I've done some things I never thought I was gonna do, and I'm sure you have, not you, Karla, but I'm sure you. Well, it's like I don't think we always know what we are capable of on the days that we are lonely and distracted and traumatized. Like, we do not know what we would be capable of in those situations. I think we know. We don't know. We don't know. Well,
And if you're going to write someone like Lily, you really just have to very carefully consider what her backstory is. And I had a very clear backstory for Lilith that never made it to the page. But I kind of decided very early on, kind of the genesis was that her mother had left her for another kind of family. And so she dealt with rejection from a woman who should have loved her from a very, very early age in her life. And a lot of what she is doing with Deep Flow is kind of testing the love of these women and, you know, hoping that they can continually prove their devotion to her, you know?
Yes, and continually almost requiring that proof in a way, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's one of those things. And I think about False Idol. There have been other books I've read, which I like, because exactly as you said, if there's no good or bad person, there's perspective. Obviously, there's some people that I would, think, okay, I wouldn't have them over for dinner. But I think I love reading books where you're left understanding that multiple things are true at the same time, right? That if you look at the story from one angle, it's, oh, this person's the worst. And then if you do see that backstory and whatever, are they not the worst anymore? Maybe, maybe not. But now I can see a fully rounded out person, and I can see how they got to that point, even if I don't agree with it, which is completely different to like those. Like, for a long time, and this is just like an aside, I really wanted to write a superhero novel. And I was just like, I need to write this bad guy. I need to write this bad guy. And I was chatting with a friend, and, we'd watch superhero and there'd just be these generic bad guys. It's like, they're evil because they're evil, right? There's no bad.
Yeah. It's terrible, right?
It's just terrible, right? And it's like, you're watching it and you're just like, it's a guy I like to watch on YouTube who does like parody breakdowns of films, and he always talks about, oh, this guy is just like the protagonist, but evil. What? Evil? Like, they're so one-dimensional, but it's so great to have characters that are real, right? And real people are not one that, real people are multi-dimensional. You don't know what your case. Somewhere out in the multiverse, there's a version of you, something doing completely different things.
Yeah.
And I think you brought so much of those dimensions into these characters, even if some of the backstory did not make it in.
I think as a writer, you need to know the backstory, but you don't necessarily need to tell your audience the backstory. As long as you know what has formed this character, I think they will be true to life. Yeah. And I think, I've watched a lot of Marvel over the years, and the best Marvel villains, if I think about like Michael B. Jordan's character, how like we're introduced to him first, and we get to know him first, and we totally get why he is how he is. And isn't that really beautifully complex and interesting? So much more interesting to watch on screen. And if we even look at this from Thanos's point of view, like he's like just trying to avoid the Hunger Games, guys.
Like, listen, and it's so fun. I laughed because just recently I got a really good friend of mine a mug that says Thanos is right, because she loves it. But right. But the thing I liked about, because you talked about Killmonger, the thing I liked about Killmonger is that I agreed with some of that. Like, I was like, you know what? I don't disagree. You're wrong, I don't know if that would be my method, but those are certainly my values. And now this is what I think it makes someone that complex character, right? Because
it's the methods.
Right? And you see what they do, right? And I think I said to you before we hit record, I don't know how much of False Idol you want to give away versus leave, whatever you sort of enjoy. But like, you can see you can see why people do the things that they do. Even if you think you might not do it yourself, you don't, but you think you might do it yourself, you can see why people do the things that they do.
I mean, there is a version of False Idols that is maybe called something different and is not written from Sadie's perspective, and Sadie is the bad guy.
Absolutely, 100%. I could definitely see that. And
because she does some horrendous things.
she's wild.
Something might be unforgivable,
Absolutely.
But I really wanted to, particularly when approaching a character of Black heritage, specifically African-American heritage in this book, I think I have seen so many things and read so many things where there is this really messy white lady at the heart of it. And I don't think we get to see Black characters, particularly Black women, be messy enough. And so I really wanted to create this very messy, flawed character who a lot of the time isn't even likable, but hopefully is still compelling.
And I think I agree with you, and I would almost go a step further in that I feel like you don't see a lot of complex Black female characters, right? Even if they're messy, they can be messy and one-dimensional, and a bit get like this quote unquote ghetto, or however you want to describe it. Like they're just like a collection of stereotypes walking around, which I don't like. Right?
No.
Where like real people are not that, but they're not either. They're complex people, right? And I love a good, complex, compelling character, even if I don't like them very much, I love that. So that's really good. One of the things I'm gonna and then we're gonna have to say this to wrap up, but this has been such an awesome conversation. But one of the things I loved, and this is more about the storytelling aspect of things. You did a lot of flashbacks. You did a lot of playing with a timeline, jumping around. I love that type of storytelling, both on screen and in a book. I love it. What is it like to write that, right? What is it like to write that? Do you write it in order and then mess it around? Like, I'm just curious for my own fascination.
I think because of my work in theatre, film, and TV, particularly TV, I have a really strong idea of structure, and it's just kind of built into me now. When I first started learning about structure, probably around 2015, I would say, I won a competition through Ideas Tap, RIP Ideas Tap, so great. And I got a year of feature film mentoring with a development producer at Cowboy Films who made Black King Scotland and Top Boy and Fish Tank and loads of great stuff like that. And she literally spent a year drilling me on structure, and I hated it at first, but oh my gosh, it's done so much for my career. And I think because I have this very clearly inbuilt kind of idea of structure, approaching something like that was reasonably easy to do. And I didn't really have to do that much planning when it came to writing False Idols, but I did an incredible amount of research, research around cults, research around grooming and complex PTSD and the wellness industry, and, a huge amount of research, but not actually that much planning. Now, approaching novel number 3 as I am now, I've been planning in the planning stage of this for months, purely because novel number 3 involves time travel, which is such a break from, normal structure.
Well, talk to me about when that one is done. We have to. Oh my goodness, I cannot. That conversation, Karla, it's gonna be so cool.
So time travel is, anything that breaks away from traditional structure in a really kind of dramatic way. That's when I really have to get planning. But for False Idols, it kind of just came naturally. I knew there was going to have to be flashbacks. I knew I wanted to spend some time in Georgia, where the character is originally from. And I knew that I wanted to kind of really just do a deep dive into why Sadie is who she is now.
That person that you're introduced to on page 1, right? Who is complex and, all the things in that relationship that she's in at the time, that type of thing. Like, how did she get there? And I think I love flashbacks for that, because it almost feels like something's being revealed to you, like just a piece at a time. And that just fascinates me. I absolutely love that. I love stories that are told like that.
And I think as well, you know, in my first novel, which is speculative fiction, we meet a character who lives relatively now. And then a few chapters in, we jump 40 odd years into the future and we meet a different character. And so I did a lot of like playing with flash forwards almost and jumping into the future. And so, yeah, for novel number 2, I was like, okay, now we're going to play with the past and see what that feels like.
I love that. There's a couple of books that I've read that I like. You almost feel like right at the end, all of the parts of the stories meet, whether it is the different points of view of the characters or whether it is the timeline suddenly catches up or whatever. I love stories like that. It just feels like the further you go, the more revelations you get. So if anybody who loves this type of, like, you're going to absolutely love False Idol. So go there. Gonna do it. Just do it. So starting wrapping up, which makes me sad. This has been such an awesome conversation. What has been your proudest moment during this process?
My proudest moment?
Moment.
I guess just selling the book. Because I think once you know it's going to be out in the world, it's like everything else is just a bonus, you know? And I was incredibly lucky because I sold both books within a month of each other, which was just crazy. So that kind of made me feel like, okay, like this could be a viable thing for me, writing novels. And really and truly, I feel like the whole experience of writing novels has been so wonderful because it's so much more straightforward than doing theatre, film, and TV. You know, I love theatre, film, and TV. It's amazing, and you know, I want to do so much more of it. But it is a very kind of complex process of like you write a script and you do a few drafts of it, and then you pitch it to a production company, and they're like, "We love it, and we love you, but is there a version of this where?" And then you've got to kind of rewrite it. And a lot of the time you're rewriting it for free. And that can go on and on and on. You know, I had one script where it was like a 3-year period of rewrite after rewrite after rewrite. And, you know, once all that's done and the production company has decided whether they want it or not, you've then got to pitch it to the broadcasters. And then the same process begin, you know. So you meet people who've been like, oh, yeah, I made the show, but it took me 10, 12, 13 years to get it made. Whereas with books, it's so much more linear. You know, you write the book and you pretty much do it on your own, and then you share it with your agent. And then your agent, you know, my agent's a wonderful editor and really kind of helped me fine tune both of these books. And then he's like, right, well, I'm going to pitch it to publishers now. And they either like it and want to buy it or they don't. And that's it. That's refreshing. But yeah, I mean, just even... I think something that I'm really proud of is that when I thought my first novel wasn't going to sell, it would have been really easy for me to be like, I'm going to scuttle back into my box and never write a novel again.
I'll write another novel when you're like, well, yeah. And
the opposite happened, and I did write another novel. And, you know, by the time we started shopping that novel, the first novel got picked up. And so that's why it happened in such quick succession. And I do kind of look back at that and go, wow, what if I'd just given up? That would have been stupid. For anyone who's listening that is like, you know, worrying about rejection or, you know, worrying about a book that they've written and will it be right for the world and will anyone pick it up? And I think just keep at it would be my advice, and just really believe in this child that you have created, because not everybody will get it, but you don't need everyone to get it. You just need one person to get it, you know?
As soon as this is finished, I'm going to forward it to my friend. I've got a really good friend. Hey, Alice, who will be listening to this episode when it goes out live, who's at that point where she's just finished her first book. She's at that point where she's trying to get an agent, and it, you know, I think I feel like that's what she needs to hear today. So I'm gonna send her this as soon as we get off the call. But
well, Alison and anyone like Alison, getting a book agent is hard, you know. And I've got acting agents and theatre, film, and TV writing agents and publicists and all sorts. But getting a book agent was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. And gosh, wall of silence from many people and from other people, rejection, and, you know, but it only takes one agent to get you. And just, you know, it might be dozens of emails before you find that agent. But my agent signed me off the first 3 chapters of my first book. You know, he didn't even read the rest of it. So he really got it, you know, and he's wonderful. I couldn't ask for a better agent. So just keep at it.
She'll appreciate that. So just before we wrap up, I have like a lightning round that I do, which is just like a few questions, put 4 minutes on the clock, and we go.
I'm on one.
So let's go. What's bringing you joy right now?
My baby nephew is bringing me so much joy right now. Being an auntie for my entire personality.
I will tell you, when my first nephew was born, it full out changed me, came to a different person. He's 11 now, and there's like, I've got 3 nephews and a niece, and the most recent one was born on the 1st of April. So I'm still in that new auntie glow, but I fully feel you. They're the best. Having a nephew is like life itself. So
and he's the cutest child. No shade to any other child out there, but he is the cutest child that has ever lived. I'm completely obsessed. So yeah, so much.
Fantastic. What is something you want to try for fun?
To try for fun? Oh, I really want to. I mean, I'm such an ADHD person in the sense that there are so many things I want to try and do, but I really want to get into sewing my own clothes, creating my own clothes, because I am a tall girl. And I'm just lanky. I'm shaped like a yardstick, basically. And finding pants, especially that are long enough for me, is like the bane of my existence. So I just need to start making my own.
Absolutely. I put that on a list the other day, sewing my own clothes. So I'm with you right there.
Practical and hope joyous as well.
Exactly. And what returns you to joy? You know, when you've had one of those rough days, what returns you to joy?
Probably
you.
My baby nephew isn't a hand. Movement, you know, I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that I've had issues with my knees. But yoga really changed things for the better with that. You know, I still creak when I go down the stairs and things like that. But movement is such an essential part of my life. I exercise 6 days a week, and you know, there's yoga, there's pole fitness, there's going to the gym, there's climbing, like just, you know, martial arts I do every Wednesday. There's so many things that I enjoy doing. And, you know, my brother says this all the time, like I'm a completely different person after I've had my morning workout than I am before it, you know? So yeah, get those endorphins flowing. I think we are used to move. I really do believe that.
I love that. That's fantastic. What is a quote that represents or brings you joy?
Oh, wow. I think it's a quote that is almost like a pathway to considering what your joy is. And it would be James Baldwin, you have to go the way your blood beats. And I think, you know, it's something that the LGBTQ plus community, which I am part of, has kind of claimed in terms of like, you know, thinking about living authentically and all of that, and how, you know, you can't help who you are, and so you may as well embrace it. But I also think that that quote really applies to thinking about what your highest joy is and what your passion is, and following that and continuing to follow that, because that is the only way to live your life authentically.
I love that. And it reminds me of what you said earlier about creativity, and that idea that, you know, creatives are going to be outside the box, and that's what they're doing. They're leaning into that thing. They're not worried about the commercializability or whatever word I just made up there to go in there. They are going to go that way. And I absolutely love that. And the last one, what is something that you dread but always feels good afterwards?
Oh, do you know what I did recently that I really dreaded? And ice bath. God, I dreaded that so much.
The first guest I've had who talked about ice baths. Gregory,
the scream I scrum when I got in that thing the first time. And then as soon as I came out of it, I immediately wanted to do it again. And I did it again. And I didn't scream that time. I managed to kind of like hold my nerves for the whole 3 minutes that I was in there, which was long enough. And I felt fantastic afterwards. Like I felt amazing. And I will do it again, but that dread will certainly keep in before I do it again. Yeah, it felt good. Yeah.
Okay, well, yes.
Important to note though, ice baths, Wim Hof, I talk about this in the book. Wim Hof does not own the patent for ice baths. They did not come from him.
Ice
They are an
bath.
Eastern practice that has been going for centuries. And yeah, I would love people to dive into researching Tibetan monks and a lot of the practices that come out of them. So
Yeah. He didn't patent ice bath. He didn't patent breathing techniques either. Let's be that. And
it's all in the book. I talk about it all in the book.
We didn't even get into a cultural appropriation, which was also on my list because we are 100% out of time. However, go and read False Idols. It's a fantastic book. It's a fantastic read. You will go deep, and that's amazing.
Thank you.
Karla, this has been a spectacular conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I've loved getting to know you. And yeah, when you bring out that next book, I'll be calling you again. So,
amazing. Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful speaking to you too.
Great. Thanks for being here. Thanks, audience, for listening to us go a bit long, and see you soon. Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the show notes below, and don't forget to hit subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, I send you big love.
Say what you want about AI, but it's here, and it's helping businesses get more done in a day. Wix's website builder is infused with AI so you can stay ahead. Create a beautiful, functional website just by describing your idea. Track how your site appears in AI search results. Create custom images on demand, or launch an entire campaign in a matter of minutes. Wix gives you AI wherever you need it. Try it now for free at Wix.com.